Morning she showed up at my door. I was 71 years old and wearing the same flannel shirt I'd had since 2019. I hadn't combed my hair. I had coffee going on the stove. The old percolator kind, not the pod machine my daughter keeps trying to get me to use. And I was standing at the kitchen window watching a pair of cardinals fight over the feeder I'd hung from the oak tree out back. That's when I heard her car in the driveway. I knew it was her before I even looked. 23 years of marriage, and I still recognized the way she accelerated too fast and then braked too hard at the last second, like she was always arriving somewhere later than she meant to. She stepped out, looked up at the house, and stood there for a long moment. I watched her from the window. She didn't know I was watching. She had one hand raised to shade her eyes even though it was overcast, and she was turning her head slow, the way you do when you're trying to make sense of something that doesn't match the picture you had in your mind. I thought about the last thing she'd said to me before the divorce was finalized. We were standing in the parking lot outside the mediator's office. It was February, cold enough that her breath made a little cloud when she spoke. She said, "You know what your problem is, Walter? You never understood what you actually had until it was gone." She meant herself. She was wrong about that. But I didn't say so. I just got in my truck and drove home. To the apartment, I mean, because that's all I had at the time. 1,400 square feet on the third floor of a complex off Route 9 with a view of the parking garage and a neighbor who played bass guitar until 11 on weeknights. I said nothing. I just let her believe what she believed. That was 6 years ago. I should back up, because none of this makes sense without the beginning, and the beginning is not a pretty story. Sandra and I got married in 1994. I was 41, she was 38, and we were both old enough to know better and too stubborn to admit it. I had a small landscaping business that I'd built over 15 years. Nothing flashy, just reliable work. A crew of 4 men I trusted, and a reputation in our county for showing up when we said we would and doing what we said we'd do. That was it. That was the whole business model, honesty and reliability. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the mortgage and put our daughter through college. Sandra worked in hospital administration. She was good at it. She was one of those people who could walk into a room full of chaos and start organizing it just by being present. I admired that about her. I still do. That's not the issue. The issue, and I've had 6 years to think about this, so I'm going to try to say it plainly, is that she stopped seeing me. Not all at once. Gradually, the way a room gets dark when the sun goes down. Not like someone flipped a switch, just a slow dimming until one day you look up and realize you can't quite make out the furniture anymore. I was a landscaper. I came home dirty. I smelled like cut grass and diesel fuel, and, in the summers, like the kind of sweat that doesn't wash off in one shower. I drove a 15-year-old pickup with a cracked dashboard. I didn't own a suit that fit anymore. At her hospital events, her colleague gatherings, her department dinners, I was the husband who stood at the edge of things with a glass of club soda and talked to whoever else looked uncomfortable. I heard her on the phone once about 2 years before things fell apart. She was talking to her sister. She didn't know I'd come in from outside. She said, "He's just very limited, Diane. He always has been. I just didn't see it when I was younger. Limited." I went back outside. I finished what I was doing in the garage. I came back in and made dinner and didn't say anything, because what do you say to a thing like that? The divorce, when it finally came, was not a surprise. It was more like a storm you've been watching build on the horizon for so long that when it finally arrives, you almost feel relieved that the waiting is over. What I didn't expect was what happened after. We had 2 properties, the house we'd lived in together and a 5-acre parcel out on Clover Road that I'd bought years before as an investment. Just bare land with good bones is what I always thought. Good elevation, wooded on 2 sides, a seasonal creek that ran along the back edge. I'd been paying taxes on it for 11 years, holding it, waiting for the right time. In the divorce, the agreement was that we would split assets. The house would be sold and proceeds divided. The Clover Road land would go to me, since I'd owned it before the marriage and could document it. That's not what happened. My former sister-in-law, Patrice, Sandra's younger sister, a real estate attorney, handled some of the paperwork on Sandra's side. I won't go into everything I found out later, but the short version is that a document I had never seen before appeared in the filing, one that reclassified the Clover Road parcel as marital property based on payments made from a joint account over the years. The payments were real. The reclassification was, in my opinion, wrong. But by the time I fully understood what had happened, the land had been awarded to Sandra, and she sold it within 4 months to a developer for $340,000. My attorney said I had a case. He said it would cost me between $60,000 and $80,000 in legal fees to pursue it, take 2 to 3 years, and the outcome was uncertain. I had a grandson who was 3 years old. His name is Tyler. His parents, my daughter Joanne and her husband, were saving for a house of their own. I thought about spending 2 years and $80,000 in courtrooms while Tyler grew up and Joanne tried to get her footing, and I decided that wasn't the kind of man I wanted to be. So I let it go. I want to be very clear about something. Letting it go did not mean it didn't hurt. It did not mean I thought it was fair. It meant I made a choice about what I was going to do with whatever time I had left, and I chose not to spend it in a war. I moved into the apartment on Route 9. I sold my landscaping business. I was 65 by then. My knees weren't what they'd been, and I didn't have the energy to run a crew anymore. I got a fair price for it, enough to live modestly if I was careful. Sandra, meanwhile, told her version of the story. I know this because small towns are small. I know it because people who'd been friendly with both of us for years started to behave differently around me. A little quieter, a little more careful with their words. Some of them avoided me altogether. One man, Hal, who I'd played cards with every Thursday night for 8 years, stopped returning my calls. Just stopped. No explanation. What she told people, as near as I can piece together, is that I had been difficult, that I had been checked out of the marriage for years, that the financial situation was complicated because I hadn't managed things well, that she had basically been holding everything together on her own. None of that is true. But truth in a divorce is often whatever the louder person says first. I didn't argue with any of it. I didn't make calls. I didn't sit down with Hal and explain myself. I let people believe what they wanted to believe, and I turned my attention to what I could actually control, which was what came next. Here's what came next. Here's what came next. There's a piece of land I'd had my eye on for a long time, not the Clover Road parcel. Different one entirely. About 12 acres out on Whitmore Creek Road at the end of a long gravel lane. It had an old farmhouse on it that had been vacant for years, a barn that was borderline, and a pond that was not. The property had been through 2 estate sales and the price had dropped each time as the farmhouse got worse and buyers got spooked. I bought it in the spring of the year after my divorce. I paid less for it than most people pay for a car these days. Now, I want to be honest about my expectations at the time. I was 66 years old, recently divorced, living in an apartment with a fixed income and 2 replaced knees. I was not buying this land because I had a grand plan. I was buying it because I'd been looking at it for 20 years, and it felt like mine in a way I couldn't quite explain. And because the price had finally dropped to something I could manage, and because I needed something to care for, something that would grow under my hands. Joanne thought I'd lost my mind. I believe her exact words were, "Dad, you bought a falling down farmhouse and 12 acres of swamp." She's not wrong about the swamp part. 2 acres in the back are wetland. I've made peace with the wetland. The farmhouse was structurally sound. That was a thing that everyone who drove by and shook their head couldn't see, because it looked rough from the outside. But I'd been in buildings all my working life. I knew what to look for. The bones were good. The roof was the problem. The roof and the plumbing, and about 40 years of deferred maintenance. I did most of the work myself. Not because I'm a hero. Because I had time, and because working with my hands was the only thing that quieted my head. My nephew Garrett is a licensed electrician, and he helped me with the wiring in exchange for help with his property the following spring. A retired plumber from my church named Dennis did the rough plumbing for cost of materials. Everything else I either learned from YouTube or figured out by ruining it twice before getting it right. I was out there 6 days a week for 2.5 years. In the meantime, Sandra had remarried. I heard this through Joanne, who'd heard it through someone at her gym. His name was Douglas. He was an architect, apparently. Owned a firm in the city. Sandra had met him at a hospital fundraiser. Joanne told me carefully, like she was watching for my reaction. I said, good for her. And I meant it, not in a bitter way. I genuinely did not want Sandra to be unhappy. I just wanted to be left alone to do what I was doing. What I was doing by that point was finishing the second bathroom and starting on the back porch. The porch was my favorite project of everything I did on that house. I built it from reclaimed lumber, old barn boards from a place 2 counties over, weathered gray and solid as iron, and I designed it to wrap around the south and west faces of the house so that you could sit in the afternoon sun all the way into October. There's a ceiling fan, there's a porch swing I made myself, there's a view of the pond through the trees. I moved in on a Thursday in October. I remember because the maples were at peak color, which almost never happens on a convenient schedule, but that year it did. I carried my things inside in 2 truckloads, and then I sat on the porch swing with a cup of coffee and watched the pond for about an hour. I didn't call anyone. I didn't post anything. It wasn't that kind of moment. Joanne came out the following weekend with Tyler, who was 6 by then and had recently become very interested in frogs. The pond was a significant hit. He found 4 of them in under an hour and named all of them, including one he called Refrigerator. And I did not ask questions. Joanne walked through the house slowly, room by room, and she didn't say much, which is unusual for her. When she came back out to the porch, she sat down on the swing next to me and was quiet for a while. Then she said, "Dad, how did you do all this?" I said. "Dad, how did you do all this?" I said, "I just showed up every day." She said, "That's all you did?" I said that was mostly it. Show up every day. Try to do one thing right. Go home. Come back the next day. She leaned her head against my shoulder for a second, the way she hasn't done since she was small, and she said, "I'm proud of you." That was the moment that mattered, not what came later. Joanne standing in the kitchen, looking at the counters I'd laid myself, and being proud of me. That's the thing I keep coming back to. I need to explain how Sandra ended up in my driveway, because the honest answer is that I didn't invite her. Joanne had been hosting a small gathering for my birthday, 71st, at my place. Just family, a few old friends, nothing elaborate. She'd invited people herself and hadn't told me the full guest list, because she knows if I have a guest list, I will find reasons to worry about it. Sandra was apparently there because Joanne had made a decision, without consulting me, that it was time for everyone to be adult about things. I will have a conversation with my daughter about that at some point. But that day was not the day. I found out Sandra was coming about 45 minutes before she arrived, when Joanne mentioned it casually while arranging food on the counter like she was commenting on the weather. I went back outside to check on the grill, and I stayed there for a while. When Sandra pulled in, I was standing by the barn. I hadn't planned to be there. I'd gone to check on something. Honestly, I can't even remember what now. And I just hadn't come back yet. So I watched from a distance when she got out of the car. I watched her look at the house. She'd known I bought land out here. I think Joanne had mentioned it at some point, but I don't think she knew what it looked like now. Nobody really did until they came out. Nobody really did until they came out. It's not a mansion. I want to be clear about that. It's a farmhouse, roughly 2,400 square feet, with a covered front porch, the wraparound back porch I built, a repainted barn that I use partly for storage and partly as a workshop, and 12 acres of land with a pond and mature trees and a creek along the back edge that runs strong from February through June. It looks like what it is, a place someone cared for, a place someone put their hands on day after day and made right. Sandra stood by her car and looked at it for a long moment. Then she saw me and started walking over. We were polite. We're both in our 70s now. Whatever we were to each other once, we're old enough to be civil. She said something like, "This is quite a property." Said it the way people say things when they're surprised and don't quite know where to put the surprise. I said, "Thank you." She walked with me toward the back porch, because that's where everyone was gathered. We didn't talk much. I showed her the pond because she asked, and because the pond is genuinely worth seeing. She said, "When did you build all this?" I told her roughly when. She did the math quietly. "That was right after," she said. I said, "Yes." She looked at the water for a minute, then she said, "I told people you wouldn't be able to manage on your own." I believed that. She said it flat, not apologizing exactly, but not excusing it either, just saying it like a fact she was handing back to me. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. She said I was wrong about that. Those 4 words. I'm not going to pretend it was some big dramatic scene because it wasn't. It was 2 old people standing by a pond in October, and one of them saying 4 words to the other. Nobody cried. Nobody made speeches. The conversation moved on. Tyler came running around the corner chasing something, and that was that. But I've thought about it a lot since then, those 4 words and what they meant. Not for my ego. I'm past needing that. What I've thought about is what it means that it took 6 years. What those 6 years were. What I built in them and what I didn't lose. I lost some friends, in the divorce and after. Hal never did come back around, and I've made peace with that. A few acquaintances who I thought were mine turned out to belong to the version of me that existed inside the marriage, and when that version ended, so did they. That hurt for a while, but I also found out who was real. Dennis from church, who never once changed how he treated me. Garrett, who showed up every weekend for 3 months straight to run wire through walls without ever making me feel like I owed him. My neighbor down the road, an 80-year-old man named Paul, who started stopping by every few weeks with something he'd grown in his garden. Tomatoes, squash, once a truly alarming number of cucumbers, and who never needed much more than coffee and half an hour of quiet company. Those people are worth more to me than the ones I lost. And I built something. That matters. Not because of what Sandra thinks, or what Hal thinks, or what anyone thinks. I built something with my hands over 2 years, and it's real and it's mine, and I can sit on the back porch any morning I want and watch the light come up over the pond. That's not nothing. That was never nothing. It just took me a while to understand that what I'd built had always been the point, not the proving, not the showing, not the standing in the driveway, watching her face when she saw it, the work itself, the showing up, the doing one thing right and coming back the next day. I said that to Joanne once, and she thought about it for a second and said, "That's the most dad thing you've ever said." She's probably right. Tyler still comes out on weekends when the weather's right. He's 8 now and has graduated from frogs to salamanders, which apparently are more interesting for reasons he's explained to me 3 times, and I still don't fully follow. He has a particular spot along the creek he's claimed as his own. He's drawn a map of it. I don't know what this place will be in 10 years or 20. I'm 71. The knees hold, but barely. I'm not making long plans. What I know is that on a Tuesday morning, I can walk out the back door with my coffee and stand at the edge of the pond in the quiet before the birds start and just be here, in this place, in this life. I was told I couldn't manage on my own. I wake up here every morning. I think that's the whole answer right there. I've been thinking about cause and effect a lot lately, not in any complicated way, just a plain version of it, the idea that what you do with your days adds up to something, whether you're paying attention or not. When Sandra stood in my driveway and said she was wrong, I didn't feel the way I thought I would. I'd imagined that moment in a vague way over those 6 years. Not obsessively, just the way you sometimes picture a thing without meaning to. And I assumed it would feel like winning. It didn't feel like winning. It felt quieter than that, like a door closing softly in another part of the house. What I've come to understand is that the moment itself was never the point. The point was every Tuesday morning before it, every Saturday when I drove out to Whitmore Creek Road and worked until my knees told me to stop. Every evening I sat in that apartment on Route 9 and chose not to make phone calls defending myself to people who'd already made up their minds. Those days were the thing. That's where everything actually happened. There's a kind of wisdom that nobody teaches you directly. You have to earn it slowly, usually by doing the wrong thing first and paying attention to what it costs you. I spent a long time in my marriage trying to be seen a certain way, trying to fit into rooms I didn't quite belong in, trying to matter in ways that weren't natural to me. That effort cost me something I can't fully name, some version of myself that I'd been carrying around without realizing how heavy it was. After the divorce, I stopped trying. Not out of defeat, out of something closer to clarity. I thought, I am 66 years old. I know how to work. I know how to show up. I know what good land looks like, and I know how to take care of things. That's what I have. Let me just do that. Garrett showed up every weekend without being asked twice. Dennis from church never changed the way he spoke to me, not once. My neighbor Paul brought vegetables to my door for 2 years running. Tyler named frogs and drew maps of the creek and treated my 12 acres like a kingdom. None of that had anything to do with impressing anyone. It had to do with character. Mine and theirs both. That's what I keep coming back to. The people who stayed were people of character, and the life I built was built on the same thing. Not talent, not luck, not revenge. Just showing up with integrity every day and doing the work that was in front of me. Sandra said she believed I couldn't manage on my own. I think she believed it genuinely, and I think she believed it because for a long time I let other people's definitions of me become the ones I lived inside. Crawling out of that is quiet, unglamorous work. There's no single morning when you wake up different. It just accumulates the way the house accumulated, one fixed thing at a time, one right decision stacked on another, until one day you walk out the back door and there's a pond and a barn and a porch you built yourself and a grandson somewhere along the creek looking for salamanders. I was told I couldn't manage. I managed, not to prove anything, just because it was the next right thing to do. That's the whole lesson, as far as I can tell. Do the next right thing. Do it again tomorrow. Let the days add up. The rest takes care of itself.